This is Here Before, Here Now, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. This is one that I'm really interested and excited to bring to you. I've always been interested, as you all know, in Native American issues. Being from a tribal community myself, I'm Navajo Dene. My family is from Lukachukai and Piñon in Arizona on the Navajo Nation. So whenever I get an opportunity to highlight and talk to members of Indian country, especially those who are doing great things in their communities and also our country as a whole, I'd love to spotlight them. So let's talk about unity. The National Unity, which stands for United National Indian Tribal Youth, they had their conference, an annual conference in early July. And this is a really cool thing. I was actually a part of it several years ago when it took place down in Orlando. And I know the executive director. Her name is Mary Kim Titla. She used to be a reporter here in the Phoenix market. And as a kid, I saw her, and I thought it was amazing to see some Native representation, even as a child. I've talked to her several times. I know her. I guess I can call her, kind of a friend. I do have her number, so I can text her. So that's kind of cool. And she is from the San Carlos Apache Indian Reservation. And I spotlighted her during my college years as someone who is Native trying to get into the broadcasting field, and she was a great resource. So she actually invited me a few years ago to do a workshop about broadcasting with Native students from all across the country. And it was great to be able to see students from different tribal communities and also take place in another part of the country, which was pretty awesome. So earlier this year, in early July, they had their annual meeting, and about 2,500 Native youth and advisors attended, where they talked about several concerns about Indian country, and they did workshops, career education fairs, and really just a lot to help bolster the initiatives of these Native students. And I am so happy to be able to bring you a few of them who have participated in Unity and also have elected positions. So my guests today, I've got four of them, so stick around. Jonathan Arakawa, he is an enrolled member of the Lower Elwha Clallam tribe. He currently attends the Evergreen State College, where he is studying for his bachelor's degree in tribal governance. He has served in various elected and appointed positions in nonprofit organizations, tribal governments, educational institutions, and state agencies throughout the United States. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And Mahaya Ramirez is a Muskogee Creek Nation citizen in Oklahoma and a Mexican descendant from Michoacan, Mexico. She is a junior at the University of Central Oklahoma, majoring in mass communication, photographic art with a minor in journalism. Mahaya is an active Muskogee Nation Youth Council member and serves as the speaker and has held other executive committee roles since 2017. Mahaya, thank you for joining us. And I'm pronouncing your name correct, right?
Yes, and thank you for having me.
Excellent. Also joining us is Marla Messerina. She is from the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwa and is an enrolled member of the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate tribe. Marla is culturally motivated and shows her perseverance through her cultural involvement. She served as the Miss Minnesota Indian Education Association Ambassador of 2022 to 2023. Thank you for joining us, Marla.
Thank you for having me.
And Jalen Harvey is an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation, a descendant of the Pueblo of Acoma, and affiliates herself with the Hopi tribe. Jalen is a recent graduate from Sunny Slope High School, where she graduated with an advanced diploma, and she is a freshman at the University of Arizona, where she plans to major in business management and work on a double minor, I should say, in American Indian Studies and Leadership. Jalen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right. So all the fanciness aside, talking about the bios and everything that you guys do, tell me why you decided to go to Unity this year, and what are some of the things that you guys talked about really when it comes to Indian country, your communities, and also some of the issues that you feel like need to be addressed. Let's open it up. And feel free to just chime in. We can always, come back to the editing process in a bit.
For me, I went to Unity in my junior year of high school, and I was able to go to every national and mid-year conference since then. And after being able to go to my first Unity, I knew that it was something I really wanted to be part of. And being able to be in a room where everyone could relate to, the issues that I faced. And especially one being like, the urban setting with the reservation, living in Phoenix, Arizona, it was a lot different than the reservation. And being able to be with people that I feel comfortable with and I feel at home. And it's always a good experience. It's always a good vibe there. And I knew it was something I really wanted to be part of, and being able to be part of the executive committee now, it's a really exciting moment for me. And I'm really excited to see what this year has for all of the executive committee representatives.
Jalen, thank you so much. Let me just ask you a question specifically then, guys. So, Jonathan, when it comes to what you guys do, why do you feel like it's important to be involved like this? And what are some of the issues in your community, your tribal community, that you feel like need to be addressed?
Thank you for that question. It's really an opportunity for Native youth to sit at the same table and discuss issues that are similar, issues that are highly relevant across Indian country. Unity provides the platform, the space for all of Indian country to come together and, in my view, unlock Indian country's collective brain trust and really look at the issues that are impacting not only the leaders of tomorrow, but the leaders of today. So that's really, in my view, with the executive committee, this allows all the regions of Unity to come together where all of Native youth are represented, and to really sit down and buckle down and get our hands in the mud and get the work done.
Jonathan, what's an issue that's important to you?
So an issue that I really work on is getting our tribal history and language into public schools. We have a state law requirement in the state of Washington where school districts are required to teach tribal history. Now that we have this statewide, it needs to happen nationwide, because our students are being taught our history of the United States, but the history of Native people is fabricated, it's commodified. So really making sure that school districts, institutions work with tribal nations in consultation and recognizing the inherent sovereignty of our tribal nations.
Yeah, Jonathan, it's interesting that you bring that up. Obviously, for people who don't know about tribal communities, there are over 570 federally recognized tribes across the U.S. There are 22 here in Arizona, and there are many more that are state recognized. Jonathan, the question I guess I have next is, how do we teach about all of those tribes, or do states, in your view, should they focus on the ones that are specific to their areas?
It's really being in your area. So working with your local tribe, that's something that we do here in Washington State, is working with your local tribe and working with their tribal leaders, their educators, to make sure that they're teaching what they want them to teach. So it's important for school districts, higher education institutions to know who their local tribes are. You know, our tribes are everywhere. We have over 500 tribes across the United States. It's hard to miss them. If they don't know, it's because of lack of understanding, lack of their own education. So it really comes down to working with your local tribe, looking that up, seeing who your local tribe is, reach out to the tribal leadership, reach out to their education and culture department, and make sure that you're teaching something that's appropriate, culturally appropriate to the tribe.
I want to bring in Mahia into this conversation. Mahia is a Muskogee Creek Nation citizen in Oklahoma, and I see that you are majoring in mass communication. Shout out. I also majored in mass communication when I went to ASU. I guess my question for you is, Mahia, is what is an issue that you're passionate about when it comes to your tribe and its citizens, and how would you like them to be addressed?
Thank you for that question. Kind of just to kind of piggyback off of Jonathan, right now our whole tribe is really focused on getting our language and our number of speakers back up. That number was like up to 1,000, and now we're maybe half or less of that. So we're really pushing to get everybody certified in the language and at our college, we have the language certificate, and then we have now a language teaching certificate. And we're pushing that because we're trying to get an immersion school going for K through 12. And I think people fail to realize how much our language means to us as Indigenous people and how much it plays a role into our everyday lives and our culture. And it plays a role into our songs and our storytelling. And that's, I think, as a whole, I think that's what we're all going for. We're trying to bring everything back.
When it comes to your tribal community and its members, and from those that you know, do you know fluent speakers or conversational speakers, or are a lot of them people who are still trying to learn, or still not really sure how to even begin to learn?
Yeah, so our nation, we have a language department, a language and culture department. Our language department is made of about 10 fluent speakers, and they are the ones that go out and they teach the people at the college who then teach our citizens. And so, like, I've taken a lot of those classes. I'm almost done, so I'm hoping I can get that very soon. But it's another thing. It's like connecting the old to the young. And that's how it is. If we don't pass it down, if we're not passing it on, if we're not continuing to push it forward, it's not going to happen. But everyone has to get on board to do that.
Do you feel like I see you four here, obviously, you're invested in your communities, you're invested in your culture. Do you feel that's the case with people who are of your generation or even younger? What do you guys think? I'll open this up to anyone.
Sorry, wait, can you word that?
Yeah. So when it comes to just talking about what Mahaya had said with like the language and the preservation and the efforts and everything, obviously all four of you are here. You guys are invested in your communities, your tribes, and your culture. Do you feel like that's kind of the same experience as those who are your age or younger in your communities, or do you think there's some challenges there?
I definitely think that there are some challenges. I think a problem that we struggle with here in my community and probably other communities is the lack of motivation to learn it, or the lack of resources to learn it too, just because of like the historical trauma and generational trauma. Like it's hard for Native youth to dig that information and the history and the teachings like within their family, because I know like some of my friends, like their grandma won't teach them or even speak the language around them, just because they still have that trauma within the DNA. And so it's like, I guess, embarrassment or hesitation, or I'm not sure exactly, but I know that it's a struggle for some Native youth here, and probably on other reservations as well, to feel confident within their Indigenous selves.
Right, and that was Marla speaking. So Marla, you're from the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, right?
Yeah.
A member of the Sessaton Wahpeton Oyate tribe. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
So tell me about your tribal community. Where are you guys from, and how many members are there? And do you guys, just tell me a little bit about it.
I grew up on the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. I'm enrolled in Sisseton, but I didn't grow up there. But yeah, Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe is pretty big. I don't know the exact numbers, but we do expand pretty big here in Minnesota, northern Minnesota. I don't know anything.
Yeah, no, that's great. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast was to be able to highlight tribes that people may have, from our area, might not have even known about before. And so it's interesting that you mentioned that you guys have, a lot of people in your community, which is great to hear. I also see in your bio that you travel to do powwows and jingle dress dancing. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, you want to know like
just, your involvement in it, how long you've been doing it for, and what exactly is it for those who don't know?
Jingle dress dancing originated from the Ojibwe people. I started with a man in Mille Lacs. He had a dream about his granddaughter was actually sick, and then he was gifted a dream about these three Jingle Dress dancers dancing for his granddaughter, and that it healed her. So then he created the Jingle Dress, and then it heals her. That's just the short story of it. um, but yeah, so I started Jingle Dress dancing when I was younger, like really young, like when I first started walking, and I just kept dancing. I One of my biggest accomplishments that I feel really good about is my Iron Woman champion Jingle Dress label. It's like, if you don't know what that is, it's like a last one standing contest, and I danced for an hour and 5 minutes. And that's one of the things that I guess that I could say about my Jingle Dress dancing. But yeah, the farthest I traveled with my Jingle Dress dancing is Sequan Reservation in California. Um, but yeah, other than that, I just really go around Minnesota. But yeah.
Awesome. So when it comes to culture and language preservation, we've got 4 guests here who are young. You guys are in your early 20s. You guys are in your, in college right now, and everything. Got really the world at your feet. Do you feel like you have this responsibility to uphold the culture? I mean, we talk about assimilation, and we talk about things like that. My mom is a fluent speaker in Navajo. I am conversational. I'm not fluent. She grew up on the reservation. I grew up here in Phoenix. So, there's that degree of removal that that I'm experiencing, and also. I have, a kid myself, so I'm trying to keep them connected to the culture as much as I possibly can. But, with life in the city, it can be very, very tough to do that, right? So when it comes to your guys' role, do you feel like a lot of responsibility is on you to bring this awareness and this preservation of culture and language into your tribes?
For that, I'll take a shot at that. I feel it's important. It's going to be our responsibility to pass on our languages and our cultures and our teachings. You would say we have an inherent and multi-generational obligation to keep our language alive, to keep our culture alive. We all play a part in our own communities, and I can say that really as a language teacher, that it's our responsibility to pass it on, to make sure that it lives for the next 7 generations, because that's how our ancestors were. That's how far ahead that they looked, was the next 7 generations. So that's the type of vision that it's going to require for us to keep our language, our culture, and traditions alive for future generations to come, despite some of the systemic barriers that have been placed on our people. Our ancestors, our elders, our people have risen to the occasion. They've rose above those challenges. And that's why we're able to stand here today.
So, Jonathan, you say you're a language teacher. So you speak Lower Elwha Clallam? Is that the name of the language?
Clallam language.
The Clallam language. Do you see a huge interest in your community to have kids take that? Immersion programs, perhaps?
There's a lot of interest in our public schools. We've been teaching our language in the public schools for 23, 24 years. And so since then, there's been hundreds of students, native and non-native, tribal members, non-tribal members, that have taken the language classes. So we no longer have first language speakers, linguistically referred to L1 speakers. We no longer have those elders. So now we have a big base of second language speakers and a handful of 20 some odd teachers. So there's an interest, but it's always the engagement, the commitment aspect that is always the challenge. You can get something started, but the time and commitment can always be a challenge, whether families have sports going on, jobs, all these different things that kind of hinder people at times.
Jalen, do you want to add into that about being a person within the community who who's got this huge responsibility, you know, that you're undertaking by being a part of this and wanting to preserve.
Yeah. So again, I was raised in Phoenix, Arizona. So going back home is about a 4 or 5 hour drive. But fortunately, I had my grandparents who lived here in Phoenix. So they were able to teach me the language and, our traditional things. And I think one thing I'm really grateful is that my grandmother, she used to bring a lot of, when she would go home and she would come back to Phoenix, she would bring a lot of our traditional, like ingredients like blue cornmeal, our juniper ash and everything. And she would teach me how to do these different things. And it was like kind of like an everyday routine where she would speak to me in Hopi and I would have to answer back. And I really appreciate that she was encouraging me to learn the language, because I know that's a big thing is a lot of youth get discouraged by their family because they can't learn this language. And especially, having to live in two worlds is the way I like to explain it. It's hard because here in Phoenix, we don't have our Native American counselors. So when we go back home for ceremonies, we would have to say, oh, I have to go out of state or something. We would have to make up a lie just to be excused, or our tribal ceremonies wouldn't be excused. And I think that was like one of my big challenges. But now I try to encourage my fellow like nieces and nephews to learn the language, or just come over, let's make this traditional food, and I can teach you how to go step by step. And like still nowadays, my grandpa will really talk to people he would see in Hopi. Sometimes they won't understand it, but he'll explain like what it means and everything. So I think I really have to give, a lot of thank yous to my grandparents for being encouraging to learn the language and our traditions.
When it comes to issues in Indian country getting some attention nationally or just in communities, I'm curious about what your thoughts are. I know that in the last several years, obviously, we've had the MMIW crisis, MMIPW crisis, where people are wanting to change policies and find missing in justice for murdered Indigenous people. We've also currently right now have news about lithium mines in Nevada. DAPL was another issue that overtook headlines a few years ago, and also COVID on the Navajo Nation. It seems like these issues become big on the national scale, when there's controversy tied behind it. Do you feel like more needs to be out there when it comes to Native issues? Anyone can chime in on this one. Maybe Mahaya, since we haven't heard from her in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, can you actually repeat that question for a second?
Yeah, so like I said, when it comes to Native American issues, a lot of them that just gets national play are ones that may be controversial. We talk about uranium mining, we talk about lithium mining, we talk about MMIW and things of that nature. But are there other things in Indian country that should also get focused on?
Yeah, so something I want to do in my future with journalism is, yes, media does tend to focus a lot on the bad. We've seen that over the years, whether it's our Native communities or whether it's just regular communities, everyday communities in general. What I think the media kind of fails to highlight at times is the positives, all the good. I think Unity is such a great organization. Like, they should be highlighting them more. We should be highlighting these kids, putting them on these platforms, uplifting them, empowering them, so they can go out and do these things and have all these opportunities presented to them. But that only happens if we can all come together as one.
I'm curious where you get your media. Do you watch the news, listen to podcasts, or where do you find your stories?
So I've been watching a lot of the news lately and kind of just reading different articles online. I'm trying to get more into podcasts though.
Yeah. When it comes to other things that deserve coverage, Marla, what do you think needs to be out there in terms of highlighted with it when it comes to Native or Indigenous peoples?
I agree with what Mahaya said a lot, just because I see that a lot even within my school. Just even with like the announcements or the achievements, it's a lot of like, oh, there was like in general, like I think I don't know. I don't know. I agree with what Mahaya said. It's really important to really highlight the Native youth and Native people in general, or Indigenous people in general, because this is Native land. And I think it is important to show that we are still here and that we are doing great things and we're not just struggling. And it's also important to highlight that these struggles aren't ours. Like, it's not our fault, I guess I could to say. Um, yeah.
Let me just ask Lorraine one question really quickly. How much time do we have left? Did it say? 9 minutes? Okay. All right. So we got a few more minutes left with each other. You know, all this aside, obviously you guys are all just also very young and doing your own things. What are some things that, you know, things that you guys are doing outside of this kind of work that you guys like? I mean, is there any specific TV shows that Native youth are into, or music or podcasts? What's the buzz?
I'll start this. One of my favorite things that I really like doing is when I'm just home, not really doing much. I like to listen to a podcast. They come from Hopi, and they're called Kara and J-Man. And I really love their podcast because they involve a lot of their culture in their podcast, but a lot of humor. Because I think that's a big thing, is that sometimes, you know, we don't always have to be serious all the time. We can always joke around about different things. And that's a big thing I grew up with, is like being teased by my uncles and like the boys of our family and everything. And I think that really shows some light to it. So I think that's one of my favorites.
Have any of you guys watched Res Dogs? Are you guys into that show? That's a good one, right? I feel like people who aren't in these communities, I feel like at least that if you watch it, that almost gives like a kind of almost an accurate representation of what it's like, right? On tribal communities. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I would say I'm a little biased because it is filmed here on the Muskogee Reservation. And, you know, they put a lot of our citizens in it, which I feel like is a
That's
big
awesome.
plus. And just the fact that, you know, Sterling came and he was ready to highlight Native youth in that aspect. And I kind of think like that falls back, like uplifting them, giving them these opportunities to be in these spaces, opening these doors for Native youth in general. But yeah, I mean, I really love Red Dogs.
Yeah, it's a great show for anyone who hasn't seen it. I think it's so cool. And when it comes to other types of representation, I mean, do you feel like there's a shift in how Native people are being portrayed? I feel and I think that when I, you know, see things now, it seems like there's more attention to that sort of thing. You know, I've got friends who are Native, and you know, they're actors and actresses, and you know, they portray Native people on the screen, and you know, I think that's a huge shift that we're seeing. I'm just curious as to see if you guys have also noticed that.
I'll go ahead and take this one. Yeah, I think it's a good shift. It's a positive shift, seeing Native people portray Native people. Because in the past, sometimes these outlets have failed to do that. But I think it's just such a nice thing to see that they're going back and realize that, okay, let's let these Indigenous people tell their stories, you know? And I just feel like that's so important, because you don't want someone giving your story. You know what I mean? Those are our stories to tell, if that makes sense.
It really does. So with the last few minutes of this this interview, guys, I'm just going to go down the line and ask you what you plan to do with this new leadership role, and what's your game plan next for your community. So, Jaylyn, what do you feel like you're going to do next within the next year with your new role with Unity?
So I'm the Western Region representative, so I oversee Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. And I'm really excited with this new position. One thing I wrote in my application, and I remember, is that I'm really wanting to learn our nearby tribes' culture and traditions, because that's something I'm passionate about. as I'm minoring in American Indian Studies. So it kind of ties together. And that's one of my big things is I'm wanting to get involved with other tribes like youth councils. So that's what I'm really trying to do, but also show light to a lot of their work, because sometimes it's just kind of brushed aside and everything. But I think what they're doing is amazing, even if it's just a small fundraiser. To go to Unity is a big thing. And that's one of my things is I'm really wanting to show light to a lot of the tribes that are in my region and just trying to learn who they really are.
Awesome. That sounds great. Marla, what about you?
So I really love Unity, and I really think it's a solution to overcoming historical and generational trauma. So my big goal is to definitely connect with the Native youth of the councils, because that's where the motivation and the like the working is coming from, not the advisors. I mean, I'll keep in contact with the advisors, but I really think connecting with Native youth on that level and telling them like, hey, I want you here, we want you here, like I will help you, is important. And so that's my big goal, is to connect with as much councils and Native youth, even individuals, to help them and know that they're supported and that there's so many opportunities within Unity as well.
Mahaya.
For me, I represent the Southern Plains, so I get Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. So there's a lot of Native youth there, and I'm really happy to be put into this position. You can ask Jonathan, I tried to back out like 3 times, but they kept me in there. And I don't know, for me, I want to focus more on getting youth in these spaces with these tribal leaders and helping them facilitate those conversations, whether it's funding for Unity trips or just funding in general because they need a space to host an event, kind of just stuff like that.
And Jonathan, it sounds like you also have big plans.
Yes, there's been some tremendous progress made the past 2 years by the executive committee, and really the priority that we've had is revitalizing our regions, our youth councils. We've seen a significant drop over the course of the pandemic, so we have a lot of work ahead of us as it relates to getting our youth councils back up on their feet. I mean, we've seen an increase in youth councils from 325 to 365 since the pandemic, but there's still youth councils that are in need. And I really want to make sure that we provide the resources. We have many resources, but letting them know we're here. And there's many open doors for opportunities to collaborate and partner with our sister Native organizations, whether it's the National Congress of American Indians, the National Indian Education Association. We can come together, Center for Native American Youth. We all have the same priorities. We all serve Native youth. So it's really coming to the table and seeing how we can support our Native youth that we work with, because not all youth from Center for Native American Youth are involved with Unity and vice versa. Same with the other organizations. So making sure that we're there to support one another and reaching as many Native youth as possible. So that's really something that I'm looking forward to, and upholding those partnerships and making sure that our Native youth feel supported. That's what we're here for. We're here to uplift and amplify the voice of Native youth within Unity, because it's not only uplifting those voices to the greater world or within our nation, but also to our tribal leaders, making sure that our tribal leaders know that our Native youth are fully equipped to lead our tribes, our nations into the next century, you could say. Letting them know that they have been getting the tools and the knowledge and the leadership skills to do that, and let them know that these are not only the leaders of tomorrow. We hear that all the time from tribal leaders, but they're leaders of today, and making sure that message gets across to our tribal leaders.
Excellent. My guests are Jonathan, Mahaya, Marla, and Jalen. Thank you all so much for coming on my podcast, and I wish you good luck. Please keep me updated with how things go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Here Before, Here Now, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.